Hi, I'm Katie Sakura, mom to TJ, a 24-year-old with deaf blindness and multiple disabilities caused by a peroxisomal disorder. I'm also director of family programs for the GFPD and formally trained in deafblind intervention. Today, I will be serving as your host for It's a Sensory Thing. What does that mean? Which is actually part one of a two-part series that we will be doing here at the GFPD. I am grateful and delighted to be here today with Kate Beals. Kate Beals is a retired pediatric occupational therapist specializing in deaf blindness with multiple complex disabilities. Kate's previous employment took her from South Carolina Interagency Deafblind Project to the Deafblind program at Perkins School for the Blind in Massachusetts. While at Perkins, Kate was sent to China to provide training for faculty at the Shanghai School for the Blind and for professors and students at East China Normal University. Kate presents both webinar and in-person trainings for multiple state deafblind projects, early intervention programs, and has served as a keynote speaker for the Low Incidence Disabilities Conference of the Region 10 Educational Service Center in Richardson, Texas. Her areas of special interest are sensory integration and the use of hand-in-her-hand facilitation to teach motor skills. Kate has a 34-year-old son with autism and sings karaoke every Saturday night. Kate, thank you for being here to provide this training to our global community of families, students, and professionals.
Thank you, Katie. It is my pleasure to be here. I am absolutely delighted. And just for a note, it is my son who sings karaoke, not me. My specialty area in that is applause. I'm the person who claps the loudest.
I bet you do. Us moms are very proud.
I am. So are we ready to go? Awesome. We are ready. All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here. I am absolutely delighted that you are interested in this topic, and I hope that the material will be meaningful for you. Here we go. So, why is this topic important? People hear all the time, oh, it's a sensory thing, but often the therapist or consultant who says that doesn't really explain what that means. And it's important to understand. So sensory input is critical to brain development and cognition. It is the only way that we know anything at all about our own bodies and about the world around us. So when a baby's born, that baby's brain is a lot smoother than adult brains. We see a picture of an adult brain and it's all wrinkly and it's got, ridges and it just looks very wrinkly. When a baby's born, their brain is not so wrinkly. It's much smoother. And the way that brain tissue develops, these connections between the neurons, pathways, they get built through having experiences. And having experiences, which are sensory in nature, makes more wrinkles on the brain. So the more active experience a child has, the more their brain develops. So experience is sensory in nature. Like, how do you know if you're having one, right? Well, you know you're having an experience if you can see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, hear it, right? That's how you know that you're doing something. And even the experience of movement is based on processing the sensations that originate in the joints and muscles and the balance system. So we think that movement is not sensory, but there is a very important sensory component to movement because our bodies send information to the brain about what our bodies are doing. So children, of course, we want our children to do something. We want our children to learn to do things. And they learn through experience. And so whether we are, therapists, teachers, parents, we want our children to learn. And so understanding how information gets into the brain, I think, is very important. Okay, Katie. So what we're going to talk about today is the neurological foundations of sensory processing and integration. We'll discuss the 7 sensory systems and how they work. 7, not 5, 7. We'll talk about sensory integration and typical and atypical sensory processing. Okay? This is an introductory slide. Okay, so there are 7 sensory systems. You hear a lot about vision, hearing, taste, smell, and light touch or tactile. But there are 2 additional senses that are really, really important. One is called proprioception, and that means deep pressure touch and body position. It doesn't mean light tactile touch on the skin, on the surface of the skin. It's happening deep inside the muscles and the joints. And the other one that doesn't get a lot of airtime is called the vestibular system. And the vestibular system tells us our position of our head in space and about the movement of the head through space. It tells us whether we're going forward or backward, side to side, if we're right side up or upside down, tells us if we're spinning, if we're rotating. And that information is very important to any sort of daily activity. So each of the senses has specialized receptors that connect to nerves. And when a particular receptor, and there are a zillion different kinds of them, we'll look at them, but you don't have to memorize them. So when a receptor gets enough input that it's activated, it sends information to the nerves, and the nerves then send that information to the brain. How this works, and you don't have to go deep into this. Just know that sensory receptors transmit a signal to a nerve fiber through a process called transduction. Transduction transforms the physical aspect of sensory reception. And some of those types of physical aspects might be stretch to a muscle, light touch, light vibration, heavy vibration. It might be light for our vision system. It might be sound waves for our hearing system. And excuse me. Anyway, this process changes that physical input into an electrical impulse that nerves then relay to the brain. Okay? Ready? So you don't have to know these names. I just want you to know that there are a zillion different kinds of sensory receptors. Some detect mechanical forces like bend, stretch, or pressure. Some detect chemicals that come into contact with receptor. That is very much our system of smell and taste. Some receive light, that's for our vision system. Some detect changes in temperature. So there are all kinds of different receptors in the body that are going to send information to the brain. Okay? Okay. I know this slide looks really confusing, and it is not meant to scare you. It is only meant for you to know that the vision system is highly, highly complex. More than 50% of the cortex, or the surface of the brain, the high-level parts of the brain, is devoted to processing visual input. So you can only imagine if visual input is impaired or absent, the brain is missing a lot of information that it would like to have. And I think it's also important to know that research estimates that 80 to 85% of our perception, learning, cognition, and activities, that's a lot of stuff, 80 to 85% of those is all mediated through vision. So what we know about the world around us in a typical child with normally functioning vision, it comes 80 to 85% through vision. So what is in the eye, the receptors are called rods and cones. They're located in the retina of the eye. They react to light. Rods primarily, can you imagine, there are 91 million of them. They're teeny tiny little things. 91 million in each eye. They react to changes in low light and detect movement. They are not so much, they do not respond to color, but they they work in low light and they detect movement. The cones are a different kind of receptor, 4.5 to 6 million in each eye, and they respond to the color spectrum of light. These all connect to the optic nerve, which goes then to the primary visual cortex of the brain. Okay? Okay, so the hearing system is, I like to talk about this. The receptors are called hair cells. They're located in the inner ear, and they react to the physical displacement or bending caused by airwaves entering the ear and vibrating other structures on the way to the cochlea. Those hair cells connect to the auditory nerve, and the impulse travels to the brainstem and onto the temporal lobe of the brain on the side where the primary auditory cortex is located. It's different from the way that eyes process light. The hearing system processes the bending of hair cells based on the airwaves coming into the ear. And the sound is different depending on if it's a strong wave or a soft wave, and what the frequency and vibration of the wave is. Okay? All right, taste. Everybody likes to know about taste because we all enjoy eating. Well, not all of our kids do, though. But those of us who have a functioning taste system enjoy eating a whole lot. It's highly motivating. So the receptors for taste are called taste buds. We have 5,000 to 10,000 located mostly on the tongue, but they're also scattered on the roof of your mouth and the back of your throat. The taste buds respond to chemicals that come into contact with our tongue. And the nerves that carry information to the brain, that information goes through 3 different nerves: the facial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve, and the vagus nerve. New research is showing that the taste center of the brain is in the insular cortex, located between the frontal and temporal lobes. Okay. Now, smell is a little bit different from the other senses. The receptors for smell are called olfactory bulbs, and they're located on the bottom of the brain. So the bottom of the brain sits within your skull, and there are only 2 olfactory bulbs located, one above each nasal cavity. But each of those, even though there are only 2, each of the 2 has about 4 million receptor cells lining the mucous membrane. And humans have about 400 types of smell receptors. They respond to chemicals, and they can connect to the olfactory nerve. Now, the difference with smell is that smell travels directly to cortex. It doesn't stop along the way in the brainstem. It goes straight to cortex. And smell, this part of the brain, the olfactory cortex, is a component of the limbic system. And that relates to emotions, survival instincts, fear, and the formation of memories. So smell is a very primitive kind of a sense, and is highly connected to the sense of taste. We'll talk more about that when we get to sensory integration. Okay. All right. Now, the tactile system. This is what we think of mostly when we hear the word touch. When we think about touch, we usually think of light touch. And the receptors for light touch, I don't know if you can see my hands, are located in the skin, on the very surface of the body. And light touch is a protective sense that tells you if a bug is crawling on you or if there's a snake in your sleeping bag. It is protective. And because it is protective, it sends a lot of messages to what they call in the brain the reticular activating system that causes a fight or flight reaction to occur. So nobody likes a bug to crawl on them. And if you feel something, something tickly on your hand, usually what people do is they will probably voice, they will move, they will smack the the spider away, the heart will start beating faster, your palms might get a little sweaty, and you can't think real straight. So light touch is something that we really want to be aware of when we're working with our children. You heard that I have a son who's 34 and has autism. When he was little, and I was not yet an occupational therapist, every single I should tell you this later when we talk about atypical, but it's okay. Every single caregiving activity I did with him, he had huge stress reactions to feeding, dressing, grooming, washing, socks. Socks and shoes were a horrible stressor in my family at that time. So it's something to really be aware of, that light touch can be very unpleasant for some children. We'll talk more about that when we talk about sensory integration and atypical processing. Okay, Katie, thank you. All right, here is a very, very important sense that does not get much airtime, and it's extremely important for you to know about it, and it can be very helpful to you. It is called proprioception, and what proprioception is the sense that tells you your body position and about deep pressure touch. Generally speaking, proprioception is calming and organizing to the central nervous system. Nobody likes a bug to crawl on them, but everybody likes a massage with deep pressure, right? So the opposite, it has the opposite effect of light touch, which is exciting and alerting. On the proprioception, on the other hand, is calming and organizing to the central nervous system. The receptors for proprioception are located in joints, muscles, and tendons. They respond to stretch and pressure. About 10,000 of them are in your arm right now. About 10,000 of those receptors are in each arm right now. So to give you an example of what proprioception is, I want you to think about when you're driving. And when you're driving, your eyes are watching the road. If you need to brake, you don't have to look down at your foot and your ankle or your leg to know that you've moved your leg from the gas pedal to the brake pedal and pushed on it, and your ankle has extended a little bit. You don't have to look at that. You can feel it in your body. So that's what, it's just an example of what proprioception is. Another thing is, if you close your eyes and I ask you to raise your hand, you know, like you're answering a question with your eyes closed, you know whether or not you've done that with your eyes closed, right? Because you can feel it in your shoulder and your elbow and your wrist and your fingers. So that gives you an idea about what proprioception is. And I want to tell you that proprioception and vision and the vestibular system, that one that tells you where your head is in space, those three together are really important to balance. The three of those senses together make balance. And you should know also that deep pressure mediates pain and light touch. So say you go to get a drink of water in the night and you whack your shin on the corner of the coffee table. What do? Well, most people tell me, and this is what I would do too, most people tell me that they grab their shin, they're hopping around on one foot while they're grabbing their shin with both hands. They might possibly be voicing something inappropriate, and they hang on to that shin for a while until it starts to not hurt so much. Well, deep pressure is what is mediating that pain. And it actually, proprioception actually travels on a different track of the nervous system from light touch. And it has the ability, it has fewer connections that it has to make along the way to the brain, so it gets to the brain faster. Pain, temperature, and light touch travel on the same track, not on the same proprioceptive track, but on a different one. So proprioception can mediate pain, but also it can mediate light touch. So it's super important to know about it. And in our type of work, we use it a lot. Okay, Katie, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question on
Yeah,
proprioception?
sure.
I too think it's so important, and it's really not recognized and talked about very much. I didn't know about it for years with my own son. And I just wanted to ask if you could share just a few examples of what we may see in children like my own son, that are behaviors or even activities they may be doing seeking that proprioceptive input.
Sure. I have lots of examples of that, of things you might see. If a child's proprioceptive system, you know what, Katie, can I hold that question until we get to atypical processing?
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you. I
but
we
don't
share those.
don't let me
I
don't
will
let me
let you.
forget it
I
because I
will.
got the stories.
I will. I have it written down for you.
Okay, super. Thank you. We'll move on now. Oh, I hadn't even told you about vestibular yet. I'm sorry. So the vestibular system, this is located inside the inner ear. There are three, they call them semicircular canals. They lie at different planes in the head, inside the ear. And they also, like hearing, the structure, the receptor structure, are hair cells. And when your head is moving through space, there's like there's kind of a gel type substance, and I like to think of it like grass. And as your head moves, the gel moves, and when the gel moves, it pushes those hair cells from one side to another. And the force with which the hair cells bend tells the force and direction of the bending of the hair cells tells your brain about the movement of your head in space. And this information goes to the brain on the vestibulocochlear nerve, and that carries it to the brain. So remember, vestibular tells you where your head is in space. It doesn't tell you where the rest of your body is in space, but ideally your head is attached to the rest of the body, so it gives you this important information about movement. Position of the head, movement forward, backward, sideways, rotation, and if you're upside down or right side up or upside down. Okay? Okay, so for all senses, this is true. It is a one-way street. Think of it like a northbound freeway. Sensory information can only go into the brain. It cannot go out. It only goes into the brain. The way neurons are made, it is structurally impossible for sensory information to go the other way. And it travels, you can think, I put the little only up arrow as a reminder that sensory information travels on ascending pathways of the nervous system, the pathways that go up, the ones that go up to the brain. And it is a one-way street. It is impossible for it to travel a different direction. Okay? Now, once all that sensory information goes to the brain makes the decision whether it should ignore, respond, or ignore, attend, or respond. And if the brain decides to respond to that sensory input, it will send, oh, it didn't fix it. Uh-oh, I'm sorry, but this is supposed to be going down. And evidently, when I turned it the other way, it didn't save it. So pay no attention to this arrow going up. It really should be going down. I fixed it when I prepped the slide. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so motor instructions only go out from the brain to the muscles. And the way that, again, like sensory, the way neurons are built, it can only go out. It cannot go in. So motor instructions travel from the brain, and motor instructions are like what you do, okay? Like what your body does, how you react to the sensory input with your body. They travel on descending pathways, the ones going down. And I will definitely fix this slide. I thought I had already fixed it before we get you access. I'm sorry. Okay, Katie.
That's okay.
I thought it was fixed. Okay. So sensory integration. Let's talk about how the senses work together. Information from all 7 of the sensory systems, except for smell, pass through an area of the brain called the thalamus, and it's deep inside the brain. And then the brain decides, has all this information coming in at the same time. The brain has to decide, should I ignore that information? Should I pay attention to it and kind of just be watching it? Or should I react? And if the brain decides to react, then it sends motor instructions out to the muscles. Okay? So, sensory integration. Our senses work together, and that's what sensory integration is. So, taste is very reliant on smell. Balance is achieved through a combination of working together of vestibular, proprioceptive, and vision systems. So, just a few examples that from daily life. So who does this? I recently found a greeting card that says this happens to you when you get older, but I've been doing it for a long, long, long time. If you're driving down the road and you see something up ahead that looks maybe dangerous, like you have to pay attention to it, I turn the radio down in my car so I can see better. And I bet there are lots of us who do that. I've been told by others that they do that too. You turn the radio down and tell the kids to be quiet in the back seat so that you can really concentrate on your hearing. You want to shut down or concentrate on your vision. You want to shut down that hearing system for a little while so you can really concentrate. So when the other example of how senses work together that is so common, when you have a cold and you got a stuffy nose and your sinuses are all congested and it's plain miserable, and everything you eat tastes like cardboard. And the reason everything you eat tastes like cardboard is because you can't smell it. So our noses are stuffy and our taste system just tanks because smell and taste are so highly integrated with each other. So when our senses are all working very well, both individually and together, we can respond appropriately to what's going on in the world around us. And in the business, they call that making an adaptive response. You do the appropriate, correct thing for the situation. All right, let's look at typical and atypical sensory processing, and we'll get to those proprioception stories. A child with typical sensory processing ability can see and hear clearly. They enjoy tactile activities like using paint or glue. They enjoy their bath. They allow parents to perform daily living activities without stress or behavioral problems. They can be motivated to move by things that the child will see or hear, and they can be around other children without undue stress. So typically functioning sensory system, the children make an adaptive response. They do the right thing for the situation. But sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes things might go wrong with registration of sensation, processing, or integration. And the problems could be with the receptors themselves, with the nerves the information travels on, or in the brain itself. So examples would be if a child has a vision or hearing loss or impairment. Some children might have extra sensitivity to any of the senses. My son was extremely extra sensitive to light touch, extremely. He was also defensive to visual input. He used to work, those cardboard puzzles that have maybe 25 pieces in them. He would work them upside down on the gray side. He didn't use the visual information on the picture was too much. So they might be extra sensitive to any type of sensation. They also might be undersensitive to any of the sensations. And when that happens, they're going to do things to really seek out that type of input that they're not getting enough of. There are also situations where a child, maybe due to motor impairment or environmental poverty, a child might have reduced opportunities to move around in the environment, to obtain different types of sensory input. So here's the deal. If sensory information going into the brain is absent if it's decreased or if it's distorted somehow, then the motor response that the brain tells the muscles to perform is probably going to look inappropriate for the sensory input. Okay, and then we go, why is he doing that? So how do we assess sensory processing? We assess it by looking at behavior. We watch what the child does. Okay. So atypical processing. There are children who overreact to sensory input and try to avoid it. They try to get away from it because that sensation makes them feel very uncomfortable. And in the field, we call these children sensory avoiders. They're avoiding sensory input that is unpleasant for them. It might be pleasant for us, but it is not pleasant for them. Then there are children who overreact to sensory input, and they're usually trying to seek out as much of it as they can possibly get. And we call those children sensory seekers. Sometimes, we all know these children, sometimes they seek out sensory input they crave in unsafe ways. Now, the deal is that the same child can both overreact to some sensations and underreact to others. So it gets a little bit complicated. Okay. So a typical of the behaviors of a sensory avoider, they're going to have a big reaction to a small input. They might cover their eyes or ears. They scream, scratch, kick, pull parents' hair during caregiving activities. That was me. Reject foods with novel textures, withdraw from being touched. They might refuse to touch a variety of objects or substances that they find aversive. They might want their hands wiped frequently. If they're self-feeding, they want their face wiped. Families use lots and lots of napkins for children who do that. Okay. In a sensory seeker, they're going to have a small reaction to a big input. They're going to be the opposite for that sense. And these are some things that you might see them do. Climb up and jump down from the sofa or countertop, run and slam their bodies into large objects on purpose, or banging objects together. I should have put these according to the sense, but those first two examples would be under-processing proprioception. Another under-processing proprioception would be to bury themselves under pillows or squeeze into small spaces. And so these are things that I'm going to talk about what Katie asked before. Just a sip. I worked with a child once who his proprioception was so diminished that what we ended up doing at his evaluation, we put ankle weights on him. We put wrist weights on him. We wrapped his trunk in ACE bandages, so he's getting a lot of pressure for the trunk. After that, we put on a weighted vest. We gave him a toy grocery cart to push, and we put like all of our other wrist weights in it, everything else that we had for him to push the cart. And we walked down a hallway with his mom. His mom said, "This is the first time he has ever walked beside me." And we literally watched this child without the weights on run down the hall and hurl himself into the vending machine. My son used to push off from the kitchen counter and push off and then push off on the opposite side and he'd go back and forth across the kitchen, pushing off from the counter. Couch hiders, they squeeze into small spaces. Katie, did you have some examples of children that you wanted to share, or behaviors that you wanted?
I think maybe just for the sake of time, I know that we're going to be able to come back together with maybe some of the audience that's listening to this from professionals, families, some of the students as well. So maybe we can share some more examples, and some of the families, even when we come together, we'll be able to share some of their examples too. But I appreciate you sharing it, because I feel like for myself as a mom, even that the vestibular and proprioceptive senses just aren't talked about a lot. And you have just done amazing, just with this one short presentation and helping, others be able to know that, your title was perfect, actually, Kate, and that saying that's what teachers and professionals and even us parents do. Someone may look and observe something and they go, oh, that's just a sensory thing. And you've just done an amazing job giving these examples and really showing us there's a reason behind that activity. There's a purpose. And so, no, I just can't wait for all of us to be able to talk about it together. But go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay. Oh, all right. I know that I might be going slightly over time. I'm sorry.
I think we're good. We maybe have another 5 minutes.
Okay, great. All right. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay. So I love this. I love this visual. This is called the arousal curve. And so if you, on your x-axis down at the bottom is level of arousal. On the y-axis going up the side is productivity and availability for learning. If a child is going to learn, they have to be available and ready to learn. So the curve, it's just your basic bell curve. When there is a very low level of arousal, the little baby is sleeping, she cannot learn because her arousal level is very, very low. On the far end, over on the right, the little boy is melting down. His level of arousal is very, very high. While on the left side, with a very low level of arousal, the availability for learning is very low. With high arousal, again, there's very low availability for learning and low productivity. In the middle, where the top of the bell curve sits, that's the space where the child is both calm and alert. And it's a moderate level of arousal. And that is where you get the high alertness and productivity and availability for learning. And all 7 sensory systems contribute to our arousal level and state of alertness. Okay? So sensory input is a super powerful tool. And we as adults and people who are working with these children, we can learn to use it to move a child into a calm and alert state where they can get the most out of the learning activity. And I just call that being ready to learn. So we can use specific, and I mean, you have to use specific input from a specific system to meet the specific need of an individual child. You can't randomly apply whatever kind of sensory input you want. You have to you have to understand it and know how to focus it and how to make it correct for the particular child at the particular time. But we can use arousing input for a child who is under aroused. We can increase arousal. For a child who is over aroused, we can decrease it and get them to that point where they're ready to learn, where they're calm and alert. Okay. Okay. Oh, we're getting close. We're getting close. So in summary, the things that we've talked about, we've talked about the neurological foundations of sensory processing and integration. We talked about the 7 sensory systems and how they work. We pay special attention to the proprioceptive and vestibular systems. And remember that sensory input only travels into the brain. We talked about sensory integration. Sensory input from all 7 systems affects what we know about our own bodies and about the world around us. It is the only way that we know anything about our own bodies and the world around us. And sensory input influences motor output as well as cognition and learning. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. We talked a little bit about typical and atypical sensory processing. Sometimes sensory input is absent or diminished or distorted, and that makes it really hard for an individual to make an appropriate motor response to a sensory event. And the way that we assess sensory processing is by watching a child's behavior. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to add to this that, I'm excited to be able to talk about this and, after everybody is able to watch this and then even to expand on part two, because I know you've only scratched the surface of this important information. You have scratched the surface. You're really opening up
Exactly.
a lot of information for people that I hope is helpful. But I want to also encourage everyone to know that your child may be mildly affected with a peroxisomal disorder or more severely. And all of this applies. And there are collaborations that can happen among professionals, and there are appropriate assessments that can be put in place to be able to help you identify, what sensory systems may really help your child to learn best and to reach that middle place that Kate was showing on that slide about 2 slides back. It's such an important slide, and there are ways to help identify and get your child to that place.
Right. Okay, I just want to say thank you so much for your attention. I know I threw a lot of material at you in a very short time. Um, Pretty much everything that I said is on the slides if you are able to review them at a slower pace. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me at my email address, which is on the slide. It's clanmcjammies. Yes, there's a story about it, but I won't tell it now. clanmcjammies@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for your time and commitment today, Kate, to helping others improve we're improving lives here. And it's not just individuals with peroxisomal disorders, it's all of the people out there that are impacted by these sensory losses. To our audience, thank you for being with us. Stay tuned for some information on how to join us to have conversations with Kate about all of these important topics, these sensory systems, but then also to be able to watch a part two to this series. Thank you.
Thank you.